Good evening, you're very welcome to the Daily Rundown with me, Fiona Fox. Now, this is the show that chats about all the stories that are basically going to end up as chip paper tomorrow. We're going to be talking about Michelle Obama tonight, Amazon drones, and Jack White's space voyage. But before all of that, let me introduce our guests. These are the lovely people who are going to help me take all the news apart with insight and attitude. First of all, it's editor of Creative Tourist, Miss Polly Checkland is here.
Hi.
Hi, Polly. And comedian, doodler, and thought assassin, at least that's according to his Twitter bio. It's Mr. Mike Milling. Hello,
Hi.
Michael.
Hi.
Very welcome to both of you. It's been a while. I don't think we've ever had this combo on the couch.
No. Hi.
Polly, Mike, mashup. Polly, it's been a while as well. We were just saying this earlier on.
Yes. Well, it's been a while since I've been on with you. I was on a few weeks ago, so
ships in the night.
Exactly.
Looking forward to chatting to both of you this evening anyway. And you guys at home, don't forget, it's not all about us. If you fancy getting involved with the show tonight, you can always give us a tweet at the Daily Rundown. So we'd love to hear what you have to say about any of the stories throughout the evening. All right, let's go to our first one. The handling of hate crime is to be reviewed after a sharp rise in the number of incidents following the EU referendum. This comes after reports that more than 6,000 hate crimes have been reported since late June. This is a 20% rise compared to the same time last year. Now, the most common form of abuse in June was violence against the person, which includes common assault, verbal abuse and harassment. The daily rate for incidents reported peaked at 289 on June 25th, and that was the day after the EU referendum. You might remember this shocking. I found it shocking. You guys look not so shocked, doesn't it? No, but all jokes aside, obviously this is horrendous, horrible numbers. Are you surprised? Are you surprised, first of all, either of you?
Well, I think as you were saying, the whole Brexit thing, it's not like we can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And we can't help but see a sort of direct correlation between what happened and the referendum and now what's happening and these things coming about. So, but obviously there's a lot of blame that is dangerous there, and obviously we're thinking of the outcome of the referendum. Would things have been different? And obviously you can't blame people who voted leave. That you can't say they're all racist or have those kind of views, but obviously the argument is that it may have given a platform to people with those disgusting views. But I mean that's it, is that they've been given a platform, but you can't tar everyone with a brush.
That doorstep, I think, but that's what I was going to say. Do you feel that this referendum has highlighted obviously the statistics there, that they're very bad. 6,000 obviously is a 20% rise from last year. There's no getting away from that. However, is it a situation that it has been highlighted rather than caused by the referendum?
I think there's kind of 2 points that you kind of made there, and one of them is about. See, for me, I find it interesting that the sort of reflection in the language that's was used within the Leave campaign itself, and that language and maybe particular images. The one with the kind of long line of people has become sort of notorious now, and I feel like that language is. It kind of has its own way of inciting people, and when using it within the political realm, I think it makes it seem more acceptable in any realm, seeing as politicians are supposedly our advocates and representatives. And I think what's difficult is the kind of like chicken and egg scenario. So how much was this already there, but just not finding expression in the same way, and how much of it has been amplified. Yeah. I think in general, I feel like there was a lot of anger around Brexit, and anger that it feels like it's our job now to try to understand, but separating that out from a situation in which we say that this kind of behaviour, language, treatment of other people is just not acceptable feels really, really important, to make the distinction between, okay, we want to understand why people are angry and what they feel and why they feel this, versus saying, actually, but you can't treat people in this way. So I think that's, it's
brought people out of the shadows, like the guests with those views, And I think the only thing you can blame is the referendum itself and the whole thing, the ugly campaign that it was.
I think the ugliness of the campaigning is a factor here, and I do feel like actually on both sides the fear tactics that have been spoken about quite a lot have been very problematic. It just turns out that one side won, and I don't know, I think it would be really interesting to know what would have happened if we'd have voted to remain, whether that anger that was there on the Leave side would have still kind of bubbled over a bit.
It would have come out. I mean, I
don't
think
know.
you also can't get away from the fact that with big upheaval like this, there's always going to be a sort of a bandwagon mentality, as you said, an opportunist, and people just want to generally cause mayhem or cause kind of unpleasantness. That's always going to happen anyway as well, so you have to factor that in. Hate crime as a topic has come up quite a lot anyway outside of Brexit. I have a massive agenda to move the topics away from Brexit, obviously. No, but it has done. Do you think that within the law there's a need there now for more understanding, retraining? In the last few years we've had incidents such as stalking, social media bullying, that there wasn't actually laws in place to protect people, to protect victims.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a gap there generally?
Well, I think there feels like there's two things there, and one is the phenomenon of the internet and the way in which it just feels across the board legislation is racing to try to catch up with the internet and what's happening with it all of the time. And I think that's kind of true. I mean, I think we're going to talk later about the Amazon using drones for mail delivery, and again there's this gap between how technology is developing and how we legislate and think about it and ask kind of moral, ethical questions around it. But I also think it's really interesting what's being now classed as hate crime. So there was the story recently about Nottinghamshire police who are now classing kind of wolf whistling, catcalling, broadly unwanted sexual advances as a hate crime, and deeming it to be unacceptable and something that needs to be kind of punished. And I think that's really interesting and in my view absolutely necessary and all to the good, because why do we class ill treatment of someone because of their gender differently to ill treatment of someone because of their race?
It's interesting, isn't it though? I think that's almost the last, and it really shouldn't be, it's almost the last sort of taboo within hate crime, isn't it? The gender, the sexist kind of behaviour is the last one to be tackled almost, I think.
Well, but I almost feel like it's more accepted than
that's what I mean,
racial abuse and even homophobia now. I think that it feels like it's so insidious and it's so subtle in many ways. It's hard to put a finger on. There's a whole rhetoric around joking, which I find really interesting, and I think it's really hard because I'm not someone who advocates for having no sense of humour and no ability to understand the boundaries of a joke. But I think when those jokes, the kind of balance of who they are in support and who is the victim of said joke often feels actually off. And yeah, I don't know whether you agree with that actually kind of
coming from a comedian background.
It's always tricky. I mean, joking about any sort of subject like the ones you mentioned, homophobia, homosexuality, anything that you're always going to have these tricky situations, but a lot of comedians obviously try and tackle that head on and come up with but I guess you can cross the line, can't you?
There is an idea though that if it's a joke it's fine, isn't there? There's something that if it's a joke it's fine. Is it?
I don't completely agree with that.
I sometimes think it is in some way, but then obviously you list 5 examples and I'll disagree with every single one of them.
Exactly, it depends, because I meet a lot of comedians who say, I get really annoyed at people who get so offended by stuff and I, everything I say is a joke. But it's not. People have a right to be offended by. You've got a right to say that joke. People have got a right to be offended by what you said.
I think my favourite distinction with this is the idea that it depends on who is the victim of the joke. Yeah. And so if the victim is someone who is being discriminated against, then the joke, A, in my opinion, isn't all that funny. And B, isn't all that acceptable. It's something that's used to talk about particularly kind of sexual abuse and rape jokes quite a lot. That if it's talking about the rape culture that we live in, then and kind of casting a comedic but quite sort of revealing light on that maybe, then that's okay. But if the person who's the victim is the butt of the joke, then that's problematic.
And it is interesting, like, there'll be a lot of people who will happily, stand up against hate crime. In this instance, for example, what's happened after Brexit, but maybe think, wolf whistling, that's all fine. It's quite a divisive subject, I think.
Yeah.
Just quickly to go back to this, what do we think? How would you like to see hate crimes tackled?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, how are we supposed to reduce this? Harsher sentences, or sentences at all in some cases?
It's difficult because, as you were saying about social media and everything, because you can get like arrested for a tweet now, can't you? And there's a whole debate about that, about whether Twitter or you just tweeted something and you should be held, criminally accountable for that. I'm not sure, but we've got to look at obviously what's happening in America as well. Again, social media, we wouldn't know so much about what's happening in America if it wasn't for the age we live in now, that internet and everything.
Instant.
Yeah, exactly. And we could be more involved in the whole Black Lives Matter thing and everything. So it's got, it's a good thing as well.
What would you like to see though? I mean, would you like to see actual sentences for hate crime? Because I think we're not really at that stage yet, to be honest.
Well, it's more that I think we have a massive problem at the moment with the judicial system in this country in terms of the insane number of people we're sticking into prisons and the ineffectiveness of that as a way of, in a longer term way, correcting this behaviour, and that's a kind of bigger opinion, I suppose. But I do feel that I'm really glad that a part of what's being spoken of is not just police force but also schools, and the idea of talking to people at a young age, to getting to them when their opinions are kind of fresh, malleable, and trying to give them some context and some understanding for why repeating certain things, or in fact offering certain opinions can be quite sort of problematic. I have a friend who's a teacher, and she said that words get used in the playground that that they have to kind of call out, but actually if you explain to kids the context, and they by and large they get it and they adjust how they think about it.
So the conclusion we generally come to here is then it's education at that level, isn't it? To
that on all levels, I feel.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thanks very much for that, guys. We're going to go for our first break of the evening. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots more news and we've got a guest interview coming up as well. See you soon.